All right, here we go. So we're going to look through the anatomy because your mechanics are your ability to move your anatomy.
Yeah.
So of course you're telling your anatomy what to do, but your anatomy has to be able to perform what you want it to perform. If not, then that's the issues with the mechanics can be here in the anatomy, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to go through mobility first. So trunk rotation. So, you know, we're trying to optimize the kinetic chain. We're trying to delay the hips or the trunk from the hips to sequence energy up. You're a little tight here. So what that means is if your hips are opening well, if they fully open at landing, you're gonna have a hard time keeping your trunk closed.
Yeah.
Your hip abduction's a little tight. So that means this movement, you're a little restricted. So we stay in that movement as long as we can because that delays rotation. Because the moment we go into rotation, we transfer energy. So the longer we can stay in this movement, meaning go in this way, then the longer we delay rotation and the more momentum we can build before rotation, which is meaning we can have more energy to the ball. So you're a little tight there too. So that means you could start rotation early.
He's always tight.
Yeah. Well, so the point is we're trying to find things that you're struggling with because when we make those improvements, we see we see velocity gains. So it's like every restriction is like a positive for us because that's where we get better, right? Because think about it, if it was like, you know, if you say you're 85, but I'm like, I don't see anything, then we have nothing to work on, right? But you can see a lot of challenges to overcome. Your ankles are weak. That probably goes to, that's going to go to your power issues, but that's even a strength issue. I mean, you could be strong in your hips, and you're posterior chain, but you're weak in your ankles, okay? And at your age too, this is gonna be normal. So as far as rotation now, your femur rotation, which is this movement, is tight. Your external rotation is good, but your internal rotation is tight. So why that's important is because for my hips to come around, I have to do this. I have to turn my femur. So you're restricted there. That means if I'm restricted here, I can't get my hips all the way around. Okay, so we have to work on that. Your hip flexion's tight. So what that means is if I'm able to get a long, powerful stride, and I'm creating a position at landing to push my trunk over, and you're gonna be a little tight there in flexion. Yeah, you can film me whatever you want. Or mom can be the cinematographer. Hip extension is tight. So what that means is if you're able to get a long stride, which there's restrictions to even prevent that, you're gonna have a hard time fully opening your hips.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of mobility here that if you improve, what happens is you're lengthening your kinetic chain. So now it's like you were trying to build power on these shorter movements, now you start creating these more open, longer movements, meaning like always relate to like a jet on a runway. The distance of the runway determines the amount of time it has to accelerate. So if I create more distance, I create more opportunity to accelerate. Doesn't mean it will accelerate, just it gives it more time too. So same thing with mobility. Just because I create more mobility doesn't mean I'll go faster, but it means I have now more time to go faster. So what makes me go faster is my engine, and that's the verts and everything. So your vert is poor. Your body weight's good for your age, but your vert's poor. So, like I said, this is gonna be common for your age. But if we can even go another 10 pounds here and go another 10 inches here, you'd be a freak.
Yeah.
So think about it, that's all it is, like 10 pounds, 10 inches, you're a freak. Like if you did that in 1 year, you'd probably get drafted. Just on those two metrics right there. Because you already moved pretty well. So all you're doing is taking this and you're shooting more energy through it. Now, if at the same time too, we could improve all the mobility here, you're definitely, what I would find is if the power went there and this didn't get better, you'd be inconsistent. This would create the consistency with that. So it's like if you did the whole thing, it'd be really impressive. So that's our goal, right? So let's go through the delivery and see how it's affecting you. So you gotta keep that in the back of your mind, like the mobility issues we had, and when you move, because you'll be a lot easier on yourself because you'll be like, oh, I'm not doing this. Well, are you not doing that because you don't understand it? You don't feel it? You don't know it? Yeah, you might not be doing it because you don't have the ability. And to me, it eases your mind because you stop thinking you're crazy or you're not good, right? right, so coming out of leg lift. Okay, so like right here, I see you wanting to already start to throw yourself open. So you see your foot turning?
Yeah.
So remember what I told you? You didn't have a lot of this?
Yeah.
Which means you were gonna go on rotation early. And that's what's happening. You're already kicking your leg out to start rotation. So ideally, we see this shin. We want, the lower we can get that shin down at landing, because when we land, we want this shin pushing forces to the center of mass. The center of mass is that hip right there. So the shin is too vertical. So if it pushes force now, we just jump, which is a little bit we saw here. It almost looked like you were gonna jump out of that position. So you can see, this is the point where you open and rotate. Elite guys are gonna be like way down here when they wanna open and rotate, right?
Yeah.
So that means you're gonna be in a short stride, which you are. You're gonna be standing up, and then this is gonna affect how energy is accelerated through each segment. So you have the hip segment, the trunk segment, the arm segment. So let's look at the kinematic sequence. So this is showing us how is the sequence accelerating and how is it timing. This is foot plant, maximum external rotation, ball release. You see the lines here, they're kind of faded. So, see how close these lines are together?
Yeah.
It's not a good or bad thing, but a lot of times you find guys that have more mobility, they have a longer stride, these are a lot farther apart. So when I typically see guys, everything goes up and everything vertical, I see it, it doesn't translate forward and everything just goes really quick, right? So that's like taking a runway and shortening the runway for the jet. You're giving them less time to accelerate now, right? So if we get to landing, you can see at landing, your pelvis is slower than your hip. You want it the other way around. An elite guy would be there and his pelvis at landing would be higher than his hip. And if you watch here, the pelvis would turn red when it peaks. See it peaking like while the shoulder's rotating? You don't want those peaking together because that's no hip to shoulder separation. Hip to shoulder separation would be at landing, peaking, and this be just cocking up. So you're trying to separate when these two turn red. So we don't have that happening. And that typically happens when you don't bring the shin down and you don't drive and power the hips well. When the shin stays up and everything rotates early, you don't get a lot of force through the pelvis. Make sense?
We hear that all the time.
Right. So you have to it doesn't go back to you probably not understanding that. It goes back to your hip abduction tightness, your hip extension tightness, your hip internal rotate. All that tightness makes it hard for you to get there. Yeah. But that happens, I've worked with big leaguers that have those problems. They're just usually bigger, more powerful machines and they can get away with it. So the point is you're doing two things. You're trying to keep becoming a bigger, more powerful machine, but you're also trying to sequence and mobilize your kinetic chain better because you get more out of it. So you can see your pelvis is still peaking all the way to here, almost to maximum external rotation, which is where we saw right there. And it hits some good speeds. So your rotational speeds, I bet you if we do your rotational measurements, they'll be fairly decent. Your rotational speeds are actually good. It's just your linear force looks like it might be the issue. For example, if we look at trunk velocities on trunk flexion, your trunk peaks right here at maximum external rotation. But the problem is look where the angle of it is. The angle of it is at the angle of it is at 13 degrees. An elite guy's angle at maximum external rotation would be 45. So if we took you to and notice how your angle keeps going forward. So you push out to you push out to 50 out here. Yeah, it's probably, could be 50. It looks like a little less. It looks like it turned and missed it a little bit. But really the key is at maximum external rotation, because 86% of the energy that gets the ball comes from the trunk. So your trunk peaked at maximum external rotation, which was good, but it was barely forward. So it's like saying the jet peaked, it got to its top speed down the runway, or let's say its top speed. It peaked down the runway the moment it was ready to say launch off, but the problem was it didn't go far enough. So it's like the jet was accelerating but never got a full distance, which means more than likely it didn't accelerate fast enough, right? So if you would have taken the jet, say another double the distance that it accelerated to, it potentially got to a lot higher speed. So it's like your trunk. If we could have peaked it farther forward, there's a better chance that it had more forces out there getting to the ball, right? But what drives the trunk is the lower half. So when I see a lower half that just wants to do this, I see a trunk that just wants to do that. It literally, what we do here off the ground, this is just mimics it. Yeah. So if this goes like this, the trunk just goes like that. But if this goes like this, the trunk goes like that, right?
Yeah.
So when we see the trunk restricted, we know the lower half was restricted, and it didn't optimally create what we needed, right? Yeah. And then over here, didn't you throw two? Let's see if they're both. Yeah, your vertical lift and its spin efficiency is down, and that usually relates to pronation speeds. And I typically find this when I see guys very vertical release, they don't pronate as well because the correlation's to vertical lift, because that's what they want. And all more effective pitches have that sharp movement at the end.
Yeah.
If it's this way, if it's that way, it doesn't matter. If it just stays on a plane,
His spin rates are usually in the 2300s.
Yeah,
And
well, look,
TrackMan.
but look, here's 21.
I know. This is. I'm like, these
Yeah,
are
well,
just so-
well, that's the thing is when the velo's down, the spins are gonna be down. Yeah. But that's actually good spin. But the problem is, why isn't that creating more lift? Is because your spin efficiency. So when the spin efficiency isn't good, it's more than likely because you're too vertical. You get more pronation out here. Your arm has to turn over quicker out here to help decelerate. So the point is say when you throw 90, you probably are doing this a little better. And then your arm, you pronate better, and then your vertical lift is better. Because an elite vertical lift is close to 20. So it's not too bad. And it has good spin. It's just you've got too much rifle spin. So basically, you're releasing late into pronation. So you're more on the side of the ball, and then your ball, as it goes forward, it has a little this, and it kills the lift of the spin.
Yeah.
So the point is and these all typically go together. So as you see the dynamics pick up, you see the velocity pick up, and you see the spin get sharper, right? So it's all really correlated.
Yeah.
So you just got to know when you see you not loading well, when you see your trunk finishing straight up, and you're not getting out, you know your velo's down, your spin's down, or it's not efficient. And so the point is like you got to work on the mobility, you got to work on the power to keep not only getting to where you've been, but to get even better than that.
Yeah, staying